We expect this to be the first of a series of one-on-one interviews with the possible 2016 presidential contenders. It's still early in the game, but the men and women who might be the next president of the United States, they are busy weighing their options and testing possible campaign themes. Senator Marco Rubio has been making news in recent days with his passionate views on the unrest in Venezuela, and that prompted a fiery response from the country's president. I went to Rubio's Senate office to ask him about that and much more. Senator, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Let's talk about Venezuela right now. You know, the president of Venezuela, he had some sharp words for you. He called you, and I'm translating from the Spanish, the craziest of the crazies because of your views on what's going on in Venezuela right now. What should the U.S. be doing in Venezuela?
Well, first of all, let me just say about this individual, Mr. Maduro, he's someone who actually said Hugo Chavez, after his death, appeared to him in the form of a bird. So I'm not sure who the crazy is here. All I've done is point to the human rights abuses that are occurring on the streets of Venezuela every single day. There are now documented instances, numerous, of government troops and some of these civilian militias that they have armed and they have trained who have shot and killed student protesters. This all began as a student protest 2 weeks ago because the government wasn't doing enough to go after rapists and sexual assault cases on campus. And of course, the government cracked down, but didn't crack down on the rapists, cracked down on the students. And this, of course, has spiraled into this broader discontent.
What should the U.S. do, if anything? We have limited influence.
Well, first of all, we should be involved and care. Right now, I heard yesterday the State Department said they are concerned. They shouldn't be concerned about what's happening in Venezuela. They should be outraged by it. And it should be getting the same level of attention as what's happening in Egypt or what's happening in Ukraine or other parts of the world, because this is actually closer to us. The second is, and I think we now have documented instances of human rights abuses, we should put together a package of sanctions against these individuals who are committing these atrocities and these crimes. And beyond that, I would say that we should study whether, in fact, we are at a stage where we should explore some specific sanctions against this Venezuelan government. The people, maybe a moratorium on private investment or what have you. But we need to begin, there has to be consequences for what's going on here. We need to lead through our example.
Is there a connection between what's happening in Venezuela and Cuba, which is another subject close to your heart?
Well, the connection is the Cubans get free and cheap oil from the Venezuelans. So their interest is keeping this regime in place because they're their benefactors. The Cubans have been deeply involved in the government apparatus in Venezuela for many, many years, going back to Hugo Chavez. One of the chants in the streets now among the protesters is, we don't want to become Cuba. And Cuba is clearly involved in assisting the Venezuelan government with both personnel and training and equipment to carry out these repressive activities, including, for example, the ability to shut down Twitter and social media. And I think it's a broader part of an agenda that Cuba has in furthering terrorism around the world. As we saw very recently, a UN report found that Cuba helped North Korea evade UN sanctions. So this is par for the course with the Cuban regime.
Because you tweeted on February 23rd, Havana's puppet, Nicolas Maduro, can attack me, but world sees what he is doing to people of Venezuela.
That's what he is. He is a puppet of Raul Castro, as Chavez was of Fidel. He's largely controlled by what the Cuban government tells them they want them to do. And I think within Venezuela, within the Venezuelan government, and certainly within the Venezuelan population, it's created a tremendous amount of resentment.
So you see targeted sanctions as one option right now?
Certainly.
Is there any indication the administration is ready to do that?
Well, there's no indications the administration is even thinking too much about Venezuela right now, and that's unfortunate. I think we hope to be able to change that. But I think this is part of a broader issue with foreign policy in this administration. They largely view these things as challenges to be managed rather than causes to be advanced. And so the interest of the administration seems to be stability at all costs, as opposed to furthering our national interest in some of these issues.
So be specific. What if you had your way? If you were Secretary of State or President of the United States, what would you do right now?
Well, the first thing we have to understand is that many of these Venezuelan officials in their government have assets in the United States. The Venezuelan government has operations in the United States, non-diplomatic operations. Those should be targeted to be closed down, and those individuals need to be sanctioned.
Ukraine, Russia. You're on the Foreign Relations Committee. Are you satisfied with the way the administration is handling the unrest in Ukraine right now?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, certainly, I think the important thing is what happens